Now let's begin. Adrian Potter sat at his kitchen table, watching his 13-year-old daughter Maya sketch in her notebook while her mother, Stephanie, prepared dinner. The evening light filtered through the windows of their suburban home, casting warm shadows across the hardwood floors. This was his favorite part of the day, the quiet moments before chaos arrived in the form of homework battles and bedtime negotiations. Grandpa Wendell called again. Stephanie mentioned, stirring pasta sauce. He wants to service Maya's bike this weekend. Says the gears probably need adjusting. Adrian looked up from his laptop, where he'd been reviewing case files from his work as a behavioral consultant for the county prosecutor's office. Her bike's fine. I checked it last month. You know how Dad is, Stephanie said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. He likes to help. Adrian knew exactly how Wendell Fritz was. In the 6 years since he'd married Stephanie, he'd watched his father-in-law insert himself into every aspect of their lives with the persistence of a splinter working deeper into skin. The man had opinions about their parenting, their finances, their choice of neighborhood. He showed up unannounced, called multiple times daily, and had a disturbing habit of knowing things he shouldn't, like when they'd be home or what routes they took to work. Stephanie called it caring. Adrian's professional instincts called it something else entirely. It's okay, Mom, Maya said without looking up from her drawing. Grandpa's actually pretty good with bikes. See? Stephanie set plates on the table. It's not a big deal, Adrian. He studied his wife's face, noting the defensive set of her shoulders. This was familiar territory. Any criticism of Wendell Fritz was met with justifications, explanations, and ultimately, an argument that would leave Stephanie in tears and Adrian sleeping on the couch. So he did what he'd learned to do. He smiled and nodded. Sure. Tell him Maya can drop it off Saturday. But that night, after Stephanie and Maya had gone to bed, Adrian sat in his home office and pulled up the file he'd been keeping for the past 2 years. Not on any computer linked to the internet. He wasn't stupid. This was on an encrypted external drive that never left his possession. The file was titled WF Pattern Analysis. Page after page documented incidents most people would dismiss as coincidence or fatherly concern. Wendell always seemed to know when Stephanie had a doctor's appointment, even when she hadn't told him. He'd shown up at Maya's school during pickup 3 times when it wasn't his scheduled day, claiming he just had a feeling they might need help. He'd given Stephanie a new phone for her birthday last year, pre-set up and ready to use. When Adrian suggested she transfer her data herself, Wendell had looked at him with cold eyes that promised nothing good. Adrian had worked enough cases involving stalkers, abusers, and predators to recognize the pattern. But patterns weren't proof, and accusing a retired accountant and beloved grandfather of sinister intent based on gut feeling would only make Adrian look paranoid and controlling. Exactly what Wendell would want. So he watched. He documented. And he waited. Saturday arrived with clear skies and Wendell Fritz's silver Toyota Camry pulling into their driveway at precisely 9 a.m. The man was nothing if not punctual. Adrian watched from the living room window as Wendell emerged, 62 years old, average height, thinning gray hair combed carefully over his scalp, wearing khakis and a polo shirt like he was heading to a country club instead of a garage. Grandpa, Maya burst out the front door, wheeling her purple mountain bike. There's my girl. Wendell's face transformed into genuine warmth when he looked at Maya. That was what made this so complicated. Adrian believed Wendell truly loved his granddaughter. But love twisted by the need for control became something toxic, something dangerous. I'll have this back to you tomorrow, sweetheart, Wendell said, loading the bike into his trunk. Good as new. Better than new. Thanks, Grandpa. Maya hugged him, and Adrian felt his jaw tighten. Stephanie appeared beside Adrian, slipping her hand into his. See? He's happy to help. Yeah, Adrian said softly. He always is. After Wendell drove away, Adrian went to his office and made a note of the time, 9:07 a.m., bike removed from premises. Then he went about his Saturday, grocery shopping with Stephanie, Maya's soccer game, dinner at their favorite Mexican place. Normal. Routine. No indication that anything in Adrian Potter's mind had shifted into a different gear entirely. Sunday afternoon, Wendell returned the bike with fanfare, demonstrating the newly adjusted gears and brakes. Maya took it for a test ride around the block, while Wendell accepted Stephanie's offer of coffee and settled into their living room like he owned it. So, Adrian, Wendell said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Stephanie tells me you've been working late a lot. New case? A few, Adrian replied, matching his father-in-law's casual tone. Standard stuff. Must be stressful, dealing with criminals all day. Wendell sipped his coffee. I worry about the influence that might have on you. On the family. I don't work with criminals. I analyze behavioral patterns to help prosecutors build cases. Still, dark work. Wendell's smile didn't waver. Stephanie and Maya need you present, not buried in some sicko's twisted mind. The message was clear. Stay in your lane, Potter. Don't think too hard about things that don't concern you. I'm always present for my family, Adrian said evenly. It's my priority. Of course it is. Wendell set down his cup. That's why I help out when I can. Family takes care of family. Later, after Wendell had left and Stephanie was reading in bed, Adrian found Maya in the garage, examining her bike with a puzzled expression. What's wrong, kiddo? Nothing's wrong. Exactly, she said slowly. It just feels different. Like the weight distribution or something. Does that sound weird? Adrian's pulse quickened, but he kept his voice calm. Not weird at all. Even small adjustments can change how a bike feels. Want me to take a look? Would you? I'm probably just being silly. You're never silly for trusting your instincts, Maya. Remember that. After she went to bed, Adrian spent 2 hours examining every inch of that bicycle. He checked the obvious places first, under the seat, in the handlebar grips, anywhere someone might casually hide something. Nothing. But Maya was right. The bike did feel different. Slightly heavier, balanced oddly toward the rear. He removed the rear wheel and examined the frame with a flashlight. At first, he saw nothing. Then, tucked into the seat tube where it met the bottom bracket, he spotted it. A small black device, no bigger than a matchbox, secured with industrial adhesive. The make and model weren't immediately recognizable, but Adrian knew exactly what it was. A GPS tracker. For several minutes, Adrian sat on the concrete floor of his garage, holding his daughter's bicycle and staring at the device that confirmed every instinct he'd had about Wendell Fritz. The rage that flooded through him was white-hot, but his hands remained steady. Rage was useful only when controlled, channeled into something productive. He could confront Wendell, call the police, tell Stephanie, but Wendell would have explanations, justifications. He was worried about Maya's safety. He'd heard about children being kidnapped. He was just being a concerned grandfather. Stephanie would believe him. She always did. The police might take a report, but what law had been broken? Grandparents tracked grandchildren all the time, didn't they? For their own good? No. Confrontation would accomplish nothing except alerting Wendell that he'd been caught, driving his controlling behavior deeper underground. Adrian removed the tracker carefully and took it to his office. Using tools he'd acquired for various home projects, he examined it thoroughly. Commercial grade, real-time tracking with a dedicated app interface. Battery life of approximately 2 weeks. And password protected, of course. He sat back in his chair, his mind working through scenarios the way he did with case files. Wendell Fritz had crossed a line, but more importantly, he'd revealed himself. The question was, what did Adrian do with that information? The answer came to him with crystalline clarity. He wasn't going to confront Wendell. He was going to teach him a lesson the man would never forget. But it required patience, planning, and a willingness to engage in psychological warfare against a man who'd been playing these games for decades. Adrian Potter had made a career of understanding how predators thought. Now he was going to use that knowledge to protect his family. He left the tracker on his desk and went to bed, lying beside Stephanie in the darkness. She stirred when he slipped under the covers. "Everything okay?" she mumbled. "Perfect," he whispered. "Go back to sleep." But Adrian didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, building his strategy piece by piece. Monday morning arrived with its usual chaos of breakfast, lunch packing, and the rush to get Maya to school on time. Adrian kissed Stephanie goodbye, dropped Maya at school, and drove to his office in the county administration building. But his mind wasn't on the sexual assault case waiting for his analysis. It was on a tracking device currently sitting in his locked desk drawer at home. During his lunch break, Adrian visited a colleague in the county's IT forensics department. Barry Burns was a specialist in digital evidence recovery, a heavy-set man with a genius-level IQ and a collection of vintage arcade machines that filled his basement. "Adrian, please tell me you've got something more interesting than another phone dump," Barry said, spinning in his chair to face him. "Actually, I need some information. Purely hypothetical. Oh, this should be good. Barry grinned. Hypothetically shoot. If someone wanted to track a GPS device without the device owner knowing they'd accessed it, could they do that? Barry's eyes lit up with the enthusiasm of someone being asked about their obsession. Depends on the device. Most commercial trackers use cloud-based platforms with mobile apps. If you had physical access to the device, you could pull the SIM card info, figure out the service provider, and potentially access the account if you knew the credentials. Or, he paused dramatically, you could clone the device's signal and mirror its data to a separate monitoring system. Way more elegant. How hard would that be? For me? 15 minutes. For a normal person? Impossible without the right equipment. Barry leaned forward. Why? You got something hinky going on. Like I said, hypothetical. Adrian smiled. But if I did have something, could you help? Strictly off the books. Barry studied him for a long moment. They'd worked together for 3 years, and Adrian had never asked for anything that bent the rules. You're one of the good guys, Adrian. If you're asking, there's a reason. Bring me what you've got. That evening, Adrian told Stephanie he needed to work late. Not a complete lie. He did go to the office. But afterward, he stopped at Barry's house, where his colleague waited with an array of equipment that looked like it belonged in a spy movie. Let's see what we've got, Barry said, taking the tracker from Adrian. 20 minutes later, Barry whistled low. Okay, this is interesting. This isn't some cheap Amazon tracker. This is professional-grade equipment. Costs about $800. Real-time updates every 60 seconds. Geofencing capabilities, historical route tracking. Whoever planted this wanted serious surveillance. Adrian's jaw tightened. Can you access the account? Already did. The tracker's registered to a burner email, but I can see the tracking history. Barry pulled up a screen showing a map with a purple line tracing routes throughout their neighborhood. Looks like this has been active for 3 days. Started Saturday morning. 3 days. Since Wendell had taken Maya's bike. Can you mirror it? Like you said, yeah, but why would you wanna? Barry trailed off, understanding dawning. Oh man. Adrian, what are you planning? I need to know where this person thinks the tracker is at all times. And I need them not to know I'm watching them watch me. Barry was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Give me your phone. 10 minutes later, Adrian had an app on his phone that mirrored exactly what Wendell saw when he checked Maya's location. Every movement, every stop, every route. Adrian would see it the moment Wendell did. Thank you, Adrian said, shaking Barry's hand. Just be careful, man. And if you need help, real help, call me. Adrian drove home with the tracker still in his pocket, his mind racing through the next phase of his plan. He'd confirmed Wendell's violation. He'd secured his ability to monitor the situation. Now came the delicate part, executing his response without Stephanie catching on before he was ready. That night, after everyone was asleep, Adrian sat in his office and studied the tracking app. According to the data, Maya had been home all evening. Tomorrow she'd go to school, come home, normal routine. Wendell would see exactly what he expected to see, until he didn't. Adrian opened his laptop and pulled up Google Maps. He traced potential routes, calculated distances, considered timing. What he needed was something that would terrify Wendell, make him reveal himself, but without putting Maya in actual danger. Then he remembered something from a case 6 months ago, a human trafficking investigation that had required Adrian to analyze movement patterns along Interstate 10. He'd learned quite a bit about freight routes, trucking schedules, and how shipping containers moved from the port of Los Angeles toward the Mexican border. A slow smile spread across Adrian's face. He spent the next 2 hours researching commercial trucking companies, their routes, and schedules. By midnight, he had what he needed, a freight company called Titan Transport that ran regular routes from Los Angeles to Guadalajara, Mexico. Their trucks stopped at a distribution center about 15 miles from Adrian's house every Tuesday and Thursday to pick up regional cargo before heading south. Perfect timing. Tomorrow was Tuesday. Adrian checked the tracking app one more time. Maya was safely asleep in her bed, exactly where Wendell expected her to be. He carefully placed the tracker back in his desk drawer and went to bed. Tuesday morning, Adrian volunteered to take Maya to school. Stephanie, grateful for the help, kissed him goodbye and headed to her job at a local dental office. Adrian dropped Maya at school, watching her disappear into the building with her backpack and bike helmet dangling from the handlebars. Then he drove to the Titan Transport Distribution Center. The facility was massive, with dozens of trucks in various stages of loading and unloading. Adrian parked in the visitor lot and watched the activity, looking for his opportunity. He didn't have to wait long. A driver emerged from one of the trucks, heading toward the facility's main office. The rear doors of his container stood open, revealing boxes of auto parts destined for Mexican assembly plants. Adrian pulled out the tracker, still in his pocket. He'd wrapped it in plastic and attached it to a small magnetic mount designed for tracking high-value shipments. He walked casually toward the truck, phone to his ear like he was taking a business call, and in one smooth motion, attached the tracker to the interior frame of the container, hidden behind a pallet of boxes. 30 seconds later, he was back in his car. The truck's schedule, according to the company's website, had it leaving Los Angeles Wednesday morning and arriving in Guadalajara by Saturday. A 5-day journey during which Wendell Fritz would watch his granddaughter's bike, and therefore, in his mind, his granddaughter, travel over 2,000 miles into Mexico. Adrian drove to work, his heart rate elevated but his hands steady. The first move was made. Now came the waiting. He checked the app periodically throughout the day. At first, the tracker remained stationary at the distribution center. Then, around 3 p.m., it began to move, local deliveries, short hops around Los Angeles. Normal for a freight truck building its cargo load. Adrian went home that evening to find Stephanie cooking dinner and Maya doing homework. Everything was normal. Everything was perfect. "How was your day?" Stephanie asked, kissing his cheek. "Productive," Adrian said honestly. "Very productive." That night, Wendell called. Stephanie chatted with him for 20 minutes about nothing. The weather, a recipe she'd tried, Maya's upcoming science project. Adrian listened from the living room, hearing his father-in-law's voice through the phone's speaker, smooth and pleasant, and hiding something rotten underneath. When Stephanie hung up, she smiled at Adrian. "Dad says he might stop by this weekend. Maybe take Maya to lunch." "That's nice," Adrian said. "I'm sure she'd enjoy that." But even as he spoke, he was checking the app. The tracker had stopped for the night at a truck stop in Riverside. Tomorrow, it would begin its journey south. Wednesday morning, the app showed movement again at 6 a.m. Adrian tracked its progress through San Diego, then crossing the border at Tijuana. He imagined Wendell at his computer or phone, checking Maya's location and seeing the same thing. At first, maybe Wendell would think it was a glitch. But as the hours passed and the location kept moving south, what would he think then? That evening, Stephanie mentioned that her father had called 3 times, which was unusual even for Wendell. Did he say what he wanted? Adrian asked carefully. Not really. He seemed distracted. Asked if Maya was feeling okay, if we had any plans for her this week. Stephanie frowned slightly. It was odd, actually. He sounded stressed. Maybe work stuff, Adrian suggested, knowing Wendell had been retired for 5 years. By Thursday, the tracker was deep in mainland Mexico, moving steadily toward Guadalajara. Adrian went about his normal routine, work, dinner, family time. But internally, he was counting down. Wendell had to be in full panic mode now. 2 days of watching his granddaughter apparently moving deeper into Mexico. 2 days of not being able to confront them without revealing what he'd done. Friday morning, Adrian's phone buzzed with a text from Stephanie. "Dad keeps calling. He wants to come over tonight. Says it's important. Is that okay?" Adrian stared at the message. It was sooner than expected, but not surprising. Wendell's need for control was warring with his fear of exposure. He had to confirm Maya was safe, but he couldn't ask directly without admitting to the tracker. "Sure," Adrian texted back. "We'll be home." He checked the app. The tracker was now in Guadalajara, sitting in what appeared to be another distribution center. Its journey was essentially complete. That evening, Adrian made sure he was the one to answer the door when Wendell arrived. His father-in-law looked terrible, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, his usually meticulous appearance disheveled. His hands trembled slightly as he stepped inside. "Wendell," Adrian said warmly. "Good to see you. Everything okay?" "Yes. Fine. Wendell's eyes darted past Adrian, scanning the house. "I wanted to see Maya. Is she home?" "In her room, doing homework." "She's fine." The relief that crossed Wendell's face was visible, followed immediately by confusion. If Maya was home, then why was the tracker in Mexico? And her bike? Wendell asked before he could stop himself. Adrian's expression didn't change, but internally, he was smiling. "Her bike?" It's in the garage. What? No reason. I just wanted to make sure the repairs held up. They're perfect. Maya loves it. Come on in. I'll get you some coffee. Adrian led Wendell to the living room, where Stephanie greeted her father with concern. Dad, you look awful. Are you feeling okay? I'm fine, honey. Just tired. But Wendell's eyes kept moving to the hallway, toward Maya's room, like he needed physical confirmation she was really there. I'll get Maya, Adrian said, walking calmly down the hall. His daughter appeared moments later, bouncing into the living room with the energy of a teenager who'd been cooped up with homework. Grandpa, are you here for dinner? Wendell pulled Maya into a tight hug, his eyes closing with what looked like genuine relief. Adrian watched the display and felt nothing but cold calculation. This man had put a tracker on a 13-year-old girl's bicycle. Whatever twisted justification lived in Wendell's mind, the violation remained. How's school, sweetheart? Wendell asked, his voice strained. Boring. But I aced my math test. Maya pulled away, oblivious to her grandfather's distress. Want to see what I'm working on? It's a project about ocean currents. Maybe later, Wendell said. I need to talk to your mom and dad for a minute. Maya shrugged and disappeared back down the hall. Stephanie looked at her father with growing concern. Dad, seriously, what's going on? You're scaring me. Wendell opened his mouth, closed it, then seemed to make a decision. I need to check something. In the garage. The garage. Stephanie looked at Adrian, confused. It's fine, Adrian said smoothly. Let's all go. He led them through the kitchen to the garage, where Maya's purple bike stood propped against the wall. Wendell went straight to it, his hands running over the frame with trembling fingers. He checked the seat tube, the exact spot where he'd hidden the tracker. Nothing. What are you looking for, Dad? Stephanie asked. Wendell straightened slowly, his face ashen. He looked at Adrian, and for the first time, real fear showed in his eyes. Because he understood now. The tracker was gone, had been gone, and Adrian had known exactly where to find it. We should talk, Adrian said quietly. Alone. Stephanie looked between them, sensing the sudden tension. What's going on? Give us a minute, Steph, Adrian said, his voice gentle but firm. Please. She hesitated, then left the garage, though Adrian could see her shadow in the kitchen doorway. She wouldn't go far. Adrian turned to Wendell, and the mask he'd been wearing for years dropped away. You want to explain why you put a GPS tracker on my daughter's bicycle? Wendell's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Or should I explain it for you? Adrian continued, his voice dangerously soft. You've been tracking her for 3 days. Watching her go to school, come home, everywhere she goes. Except for the last few days, you've been watching that tracker travel to Mexico. Must have been terrifying, watching your granddaughter apparently disappear into a foreign country. Where is it? Wendell's voice was barely a whisper. On a freight truck that's currently unloading auto parts in Guadalajara. I found your tracker Sunday night, Wendell. I removed it and attached it to something that would teach you a lesson. You had no right. I had no right. Adrian's laugh was harsh. You planted a surveillance device on a child's bicycle, and I'm the one who crossed a line? I was protecting her. Wendell's voice rose, desperate. You don't understand. The world is dangerous. I needed to know she was safe. You needed to control her. There's a difference. You can't prove anything. It's your word against mine. Adrian pulled out his phone and showed Wendell the mirrored app. I can prove everything. I have your tracking account, your login information, the complete history of everywhere you've monitored. 3 days on Maya's bike, but I'm betting if I dig deeper, I'll find more. Stephanie's phone, maybe? Her car? How long have you been watching us, Wendell? The color drained from Wendell's face completely. Here's what's going to happen, Adrian said, stepping closer. You're going to leave my house. You're going to delete your tracking account and never attempt to surveil my family again. And you're going to get help for whatever compulsion makes you think this is acceptable behavior. Stephanie will never believe you. She'll think you're trying to turn her against me. Maybe. Or maybe I show her the evidence. Let her decide if dear old Dad has her best interests at heart. Adrian's smile was cold. But honestly, I don't think you want her to know. Because if she knew what you've been doing, she'd finally see you for what you are. Wendell's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Adrian thought the older man might actually take a swing at him. He almost hoped he would. It would make everything so much simpler. But Wendell just stood there, shaking with rage and fear, and something else Adrian recognized from his work. The desperate anger of a predator whose hunting ground had been compromised. This isn't over, Wendell said finally. Yes, Adrian replied. It is. He turned and walked back into the house, leaving Wendell alone in the garage with his daughter's bike and the crushing weight of exposure. A moment later, he heard the side door open and close, then the sound of Wendell's car starting. Stephanie appeared immediately, her face tight with worry. Adrian, what the hell was that? We need to talk, he said. But first, let me check on Maya. His daughter was back in her room, headphones on, completely absorbed in her project, unaware that she'd been at the center of a psychological war between her father and grandfather. That was how it should be, Adrian thought. Children should be protected from the darkness adults created. He returned to the living room, where Stephanie waited with her arms crossed. Talk, she demanded. Adrian sat down and pulled out his phone. 3 days ago, your father returned Maya's bike after servicing it. Maya mentioned it felt different. I checked it and found this. He showed her photos he'd taken of the tracker still attached to the bike frame. Stephanie's face went white. That's not. She couldn't finish the sentence. A GPS tracker. Professional grade. I found it Sunday night. Instead of confronting your father, I removed it and attached it to a freight truck heading to Mexico. For 3 days, he's been watching what he thought was Maya traveling further and further from home. That's why he showed up tonight looking like he'd seen a ghost. Stephanie sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. No, Dad wouldn't. He couldn't. He admitted it, Steph. In the garage. He said he was protecting her. Oh God. Tears spilled down her face. Oh God, Adrian. He moved to sit beside her, pulling her into his arms. I know this is hard. How long, she whispered. How long have you suspected? Years, he admitted. Little things. The way he always knew where you'd been. The phone he gave you. How he shows up at exactly the right moment. I've been documenting it, but I never had proof until now. Stephanie pulled away, wiping her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you love him. Because every time I tried to suggest something was off, you defended him. I needed proof, something undeniable. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she spoke again, her voice was harder. What do? We set boundaries. Clear, firm ones. And if he crosses them, we go to the police. He's my father. He put a tracker on our daughter's bike, Stephanie. What comes next? What happens when Maya gets older and wants independence? Will he track her to college? To her first apartment? Stop. Stephanie stood abruptly, pacing the room. Just stop. I need to think. Adrian let her pace, watching as his wife grappled with the reality of who her father truly was. It was a painful process, one he wished he could spare her. But protecting Maya meant not sparing anyone, including Stephanie's feelings. Finally, she turned to him. I need to talk to my mother. Alone. Okay. And you don't contact my father. Not yet. I handle this my way. Adrian hesitated, then nodded. 48 hours. Then we decide together what happens next. Stephanie called her mother that night. Adrian heard pieces of the conversation through the bedroom door. Rosie's shocked denial, Stephanie's tearful insistence, the sound of his wife's world shifting under her feet. When she finally emerged, her eyes were red but her expression was determined. Mom wants to meet tomorrow. She says there are things I don't know. Things. About Dad. About. Stephanie swallowed hard. About why she almost left him 15 years ago. Adrian felt ice in his veins. What happened 15 years ago? I don't know. She wouldn't tell me over the phone. But Adrian. Stephanie looked at him with eyes that held fear and something new. Doubt in the man who'd raised her. I think we're going to find out that this is worse than just a tracking device. She was right. The next morning, Stephanie drove to her mother's house alone. Rosie Fritz lived in a modest ranch-style home in the same neighborhood where she'd raised Stephanie, a fact that had always struck Adrian as odd, considering she and Wendell had divorced 15 years ago. Not divorced, he'd learned. Separated. They still saw each other regularly, still maintained the appearance of a united front for their daughter. Now he understood why. Not love, but fear. Control didn't end with divorce papers. Adrian stayed home with Maya, keeping things normal while his world potentially imploded. They made pancakes for breakfast, and he helped her with her ocean current project, all while his phone sat on the counter, waiting for Stephanie's call. It came at 11 a.m. You need to come here, Stephanie said, her voice hollow. Now? Mom will watch Maya. 20 minutes later, Adrian walked into Rosie's neat living room to find Stephanie sitting on the couch, staring at a cardboard box on the coffee table. Rosie stood by the window, her thin frame silhouetted against the morning light. She was 60, but looked older, worn down by decades of something Adrian was only beginning to understand. "Thank you for coming," Rosie said quietly. "Stephanie said you found a tracker on Maya's bike." "I did. That's what he did to me. 20 years ago, before GPS was easy. He put a device in my car that logged my mileage and routes." Rosie turned to face him. "I found it when I took the car in for service. The mechanic thought it was strange, showed it to me. When I confronted Wendell, he said it was for insurance purposes, to track our mileage for taxes. But you didn't believe him," Adrian said. "Not after I found the cameras." Stephanie made a small sound, almost a whimper. "Cameras?" Adrian felt his professional detachment cracking. Rosie moved to the box and pulled out a photo album. He installed them in our bedroom. In Stephanie's bedroom when she was a teenager. In the bathrooms. Her hands shook as she opened the album. I found the recordings. Hours and hours of footage of me. Of our daughter. Getting dressed, showering. Everything. Adrian's blood ran cold. "I threatened to go to the police," Rosie continued. "He cried. Begged. Said he had a problem, that he'd get help. He convinced me that exposing him would destroy Stephanie's relationship with her father, that she'd never recover from knowing what he'd done. So I agreed to separate instead of divorce. I kept quiet. And I've been watching him for 15 years, making sure he didn't." "Didn't what?" Stephanie's voice was strangled. "Didn't touch you. Didn't hurt you beyond the violation of filming you." Rosie's eyes filled with tears. "I failed. I should have turned him in. I should have protected you properly. Instead, I convinced myself that as long as I was watching, as long as he knew I knew, he'd control himself." "Oh my God." Stephanie stood abruptly, her face greenish. "I'm going to be sick." She ran to the bathroom. Adrian heard retching sounds. He looked at Rosie, this woman who'd spent 15 years in a prison of her own making, and felt overwhelming sadness. "The recordings," he said. "Do you still have them?" "I destroyed them. I couldn't keep that filth in my house." "But you have proof? Of the cameras? Documentation?" "Some." Rosie pulled papers from the box. Receipts for the equipment. Emails to a therapist he never actually saw. My journal from that time. Adrian took the papers, his mind already cataloging evidence, building a case. "This is good. This is enough." "Enough for what?" "To make sure he never comes near Maya again. Near any of you." Stephanie returned, wiping her mouth, her eyes blazing with something Adrian had never seen before, rage. "I want him arrested." "Honey," Rosie started. "No. Don't honey me, Mom. He filmed me. A child. His own daughter. And you protected him. I was trying to protect you from the truth. You were protecting yourself from consequences." Stephanie's voice rose. "All these years, acting like he was just a concerned father. All those visits, those calls. I defended him to Adrian. I made excuses for him. And you knew what he was." Rosie's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Adrian stepped between them before the confrontation could escalate. "We deal with Wendell first. Then you two can work out the rest. But right now, I need to know everything. Every incident, every time he crossed a line, every piece of evidence you have." For the next 2 hours, Rosie talked. Adrian listened and took notes, his professional calm firmly in place even as his personal rage grew. The picture that emerged was of a man whose need for control had infected every relationship in his life. Wendell Fritz wasn't just overprotective or concerned. He was a predator who'd learned to disguise his compulsions as care. The recordings Rosie described went beyond simple surveillance. Wendell had categorized them, labeled them, kept them organized like a collection. When Rosie discovered them, she'd also found online accounts where he'd apparently shared some of the footage, never showing faces, he'd claimed, just anonymous content for people with similar interests. Similar interests. The term made Adrian's skin crawl. "Why didn't the therapist report him?" Adrian asked. "He never actually went. He'd make the appointments, then cancel. He showed me the emails to make me think he was getting help, but it was all performance." Rosie looked at her hands. "I was so desperate to believe he could change." By the time they finished, Adrian had a clear picture of what needed to happen next. And it didn't involve giving Wendell Fritz any more chances. "Here's the plan," he said. "Rosie, you're going to write a statement detailing everything you told me. Include dates, times, anything you remember. Stephanie, You're going to document every instance of your father's controlling behavior you can recall. Every unexpected visit, every time he knew something he shouldn't. I'm going to compile the evidence and take it to someone I trust in law enforcement. What about Maya? Stephanie asked. We need to make sure she's safe. She is safe. She doesn't leave our sight. And if Wendell tries to contact her, we document it. He'll know we're building a case against him, Rosie said nervously. Good. Let him know. Let him spend his nights wondering when the knock on his door is coming. Adrian's voice was cold. He put my daughter through 3 days of hell thinking she'd been taken to Mexico. Now it's his turn. That evening, Adrian made a call to a detective he'd worked with on multiple cases, Victor Martin, a 20-year veteran of the sex crimes unit who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and still managed to maintain his faith in the system. Adrian, Victor answered on the second ring. What's up? I need advice. Personal matter. Victor's tone immediately shifted. Talk to me. Adrian laid it out. The tracker, the historical recordings, the pattern of behavior spanning 20 years. Victor listened without interrupting, and when Adrian finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Jesus, Victor finally said. This is bad, Adrian. But it's also old. The recordings were destroyed. The statute of limitations on filming a minor is 7 years in this state. Unless we can prove he's currently engaging in similar behavior. The tracker on Maya's bike is current. It's also something a lawyer could argue was misguided concern. We need more. Then help me get more? Legally. You want to build a case. I want to protect my daughter. And make sure Wendell Fritz can't do this to anyone else. Victor exhaled slowly. Okay, here's what we do. You file for a restraining order based on the tracking device. You cite the historical behavior your mother-in-law documented as establishing a pattern. That gets us court involvement, gets it on record. Meanwhile, I make some calls, see if there are other complaints about Wendell Fritz we don't know about. Other complaints? Guys like this don't usually limit themselves to one victim, Adrian. You know that. He did know that. And the thought of what Victor might uncover made his stomach turn. Over the next week, Adrian executed his plan with precision. He filed for a restraining order, using the tracker evidence and Rosie's written statement. Wendell received the papers at his home, delivered by a process server who reported that the man had gone sheet white upon reading them. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Adrian continued working with Victor, who'd indeed found other concerning information. 2 complaints from neighbors over the years about Wendell's cameras, dismissed as disputes over property lines. A report from a teacher at Maya's school from 3 years ago about Wendell showing up during lunch without checking in at the office, claiming he'd wanted to surprise his granddaughter. Each piece of evidence was small on its own. Together, they painted a picture of a man whose boundaries had been eroding for decades. But Wendell wasn't going quietly. For days after receiving the restraining order papers, Stephanie received a letter. No return address, but they both knew who it was from. Dear Stephanie, I don't know what your husband has told you, but you must know that everything I've done has been out of love. A father's love for his daughter. A grandfather's love for his granddaughter. The world is full of dangers, and I've only ever tried to keep you safe. Adrian is manipulating you. He's turned your mother against me with lies, and now he's trying to turn you too. I'm your father. I changed your diapers. I taught you to ride a bike. I've been there for every important moment of your life. Don't let him take that away from us. Don't let him poison our family with his paranoid delusions. Please, baby girl, talk to me. Let me explain. Love always, Dad. Stephanie read the letter once, then handed it to Adrian without a word. He scanned it quickly, noting the manipulation tactics, appeals to emotion, gaslighting, attempts to drive a wedge between them. He's scared, Adrian said. Good. It's strange, Stephanie said softly. Reading that letter, I can hear his voice. I can see his face when he calls me baby girl. And I feel nothing. Like someone turned off a switch in my head. That's not nothing. That's clarity. She looked at him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she smiled. You know what? I'm glad you found that tracker. I'm glad this is happening now, before he could do worse. Does that make me a terrible daughter? It makes you a good mother. The restraining order hearing arrived with spring rain and gray skies. Adrian, Stephanie, and Rosie sat on one side of the courtroom. Wendell sat on the other with his lawyer, a slick-looking man named Jorge Robinson who specialized in making uncomfortable truths disappear. Judge Valerie Pugh presided, a stern woman in her 50s who Adrian knew from prior cases had zero tolerance for predatory behavior. That was why he'd requested her specifically. Robinson argued that Wendell's actions were those of a concerned grandfather, that the tracking device was a regrettable overreach, motivated by news reports of child abductions, that Adrian Potter was overreacting and attempting to alienate a loving father from his family. Then it was Adrian's turn. He presented the evidence methodically. The tracker, the documented pattern of surveillance, Rosie's statement about the historical cameras, the school complaint, the neighbor reports. He painted a picture not of a concerned grandfather, but of a man with a compulsion to control and surveil those he claimed to love. Robinson tried to object, claiming the historical incidents were prejudicial and unproven. Judge Pugh silenced him with a look. "Mr. Fritz," she said, addressing Wendell directly, "do you deny installing a GPS tracker on your granddaughter's bicycle without her parents' knowledge or consent?" Wendell stood, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. "Your Honor, I was concerned for her safety. That's not what I asked. Did you or did you not place the device?" "I did, but—" "Thank you. You may sit." Judge Pugh reviewed the evidence again, then looked at Wendell with barely concealed disgust. "Mr. Fritz, the court finds that you have engaged in a pattern of invasive surveillance that constitutes harassment and poses a potential threat to the minor child in question. I am granting the restraining order. You are to have no contact with Maya Potter, directly or indirectly. No calls, no texts, no emails, no showing up at her school or home. You are to remain at least 500 yards from her at all times." "Your Honor, please," Robinson started. "I'm not finished. Furthermore, I am recommending that this case be reviewed by the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges related to the surveillance of a minor. Mr. Potter, you and your family should expect contact from that office." Wendell's face had gone from pale to red. "This is insane. She's my granddaughter. She is a child who deserves to feel safe. This hearing is concluded." The gavel fell. Adrian felt Stephanie's hand squeeze his. Across the aisle, Wendell stared at them with an expression that mingled rage and disbelief. "We need to go," Adrian said quietly, guiding Stephanie and Rosie toward the exit. They almost made it to the parking lot before Wendell caught up, his lawyer trailing behind, trying to pull him back. "Stephanie," Wendell called. "Stephanie, please. Don't do this." She stopped, turned. Adrian tensed, ready to intervene if necessary. "I'm not doing this, Dad," Stephanie said, her voice steady. "You did this. You put a tracker on Maya's bike. You filmed me when I was a child. You've spent my entire life treating me like property instead of a person. This isn't about Adrian or Mom or anyone else. This is about you and the choices you made. I love you." "No, you don't. You love controlling me. There's a difference." She took Adrian's hand. "Stay away from my family. Stay away from my daughter. And get help, Dad. Real help. Because you need it." They walked away, leaving Wendell standing in the rain, his lawyer finally managing to pull him toward his car. Adrian didn't look back. He'd seen that look before, in other men whose carefully constructed facades had crumbled. Some learned from it. Most didn't. 3 days later, Victor Martin called with news. "We found something," he said, his voice grim. "Wendell Fritz has been active on several online forums dedicated to surveillance technology. He's been posting there for years, sharing tips, asking questions about avoiding detection. And Adrian, some of those forums are under FBI investigation for trading illegal content." Adrian's blood ran cold. "Please tell me he wasn't." "We don't know yet. The FBI is reviewing his activity. But between us, I've seen enough to know this guy is deeper into this than we thought. What happens now?" "Now we wait. The DA is building a case based on the restraining order evidence. If the FBI finds anything concrete, they'll add federal charges. Either way, Wendell Fritz's life as he knows it is over." Adrian thanked him and hung up. He found Stephanie in Maya's room, helping their daughter organize her book collection, a normal, mundane task that felt profoundly important in its normalcy. "Hey," he said from the doorway. Stephanie looked up, reading his expression. "What did Victor say? Can we talk? After Maya's asleep?" She nodded, understanding. That night, Adrian told her everything Victor had shared. To her credit, Stephanie didn't cry. She just sat there, processing, her face unreadable. "I keep thinking," she finally said, "about all the times he'd come to my apartment in college. He had a key, Said it was for emergencies. I'd come home, and things would be moved slightly. I thought I was being paranoid. You weren't paranoid. How many cameras did I not find, Adrian? How many times did he watch me when I thought I was alone? Her voice cracked. How do I live with that? You live with it by refusing to let it define you. By protecting Maya. By being everything he wasn't. Honest, respectful of boundaries, trustworthy. He pulled her close. You live with it by being you, Steph. Because you're nothing like him. Over the following weeks, the walls continued closing in on Wendell Fritz. The FBI investigation expanded. The DA filed criminal charges, unlawful surveillance of a minor, stalking, harassment. Each charge carried potential prison time. Adrian monitored it all through Victor, watching as the man who terrorized his family faced consequences that were, finally, proportional to his crimes. But the real victory came in smaller moments. Maya, unaware of the full extent of what had happened, knew only that Grandpa Wendell had made some bad choices and wouldn't be seeing them for a while. She was sad, but resilient. Children were good at adapting when the adults in their lives kept them safe. Stephanie started therapy, working through the trauma of realizing her entire childhood had been observed by predatory eyes. Rosie joined her, the two women rebuilding their relationship on a foundation of truth instead of protective lies. And Adrian went back to work, analyzing behavioral patterns and helping prosecutors build cases. But now, when he looked at his daughter, he saw not just the child he loved but the child he'd protected. Not through confrontation or violence, but through patience, planning, and a willingness to play the long game. 6 months after finding the tracker, Adrian sat in a courtroom watching Wendell Fritz be sentenced to 3 years in prison. The FBI had found evidence of trading illicit surveillance footage, though not the specific recordings from Rosie and Stephanie. Those had apparently been lost when Rosie destroyed them. But the pattern was enough. The judge cited Wendell's persistent violation of privacy, particularly of minors, and his lack of remorse or recognition of wrongdoing. Wendell turned in his seat before being led away. His eyes found Adrian, and in them was pure hatred. Adrian met his gaze evenly, unflinching. This was what winning looked like. Not dramatic or cathartic, but quiet and certain. That evening, Adrian came home to find Maya teaching Stephanie a new bike trick in the driveway. The purple mountain bike, now checked and rechecked to ensure no additional devices, gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Dad, Maya called. Watch this. He watched as she executed a perfect wheelie, her mother clapping and cheering. Simple, normal, safe, nice. Adrian called back. That night, after Maya was asleep and Stephanie was reading in bed, Adrian sat in his office and looked at the file he'd kept for 2 years. WF pattern analysis. He backed it up one final time, then deleted it from the drive. He didn't need it anymore. The pattern had been broken. His phone buzzed with a text from Victor. Judge denied the appeal. Fritz serves the full 3 years minimum. Thought you'd want to know. Adrian replied. Thanks. 3 years wasn't enough. Would never be enough for what Wendell Fritz had done, for the lives he'd violated, for the trust he'd shattered. But it was something. It was justice, imperfect and incomplete, but real. And sometimes, Adrian thought, that was the best you could hope for. He closed his laptop and went to bed, sliding in next to Stephanie. She turned toward him, half asleep. Everything okay? She murmured. Everything's okay, he said. And for the first time in years, he believed it. 3 months into Wendell's sentence, an unexpected development arrived in the form of a phone call from Detective Victor Martin. Adrian was at work, reviewing case files, when his phone lit up. Victor, what's up? You sitting down? Adrian's pulse quickened. Should I be? Wendell Fritz was attacked in prison. He's in the hospital, stable but pretty badly beaten. The guards are investigating, but it looks like someone got hold of his case file and discovered why he was inside. Adrian felt no satisfaction, no vindication. Just a hollow acknowledgement that even in prison, there were hierarchies of crime. Men who hurt children occupied the lowest rung. Why are you telling me this? Because he's asking to make a statement. To you, specifically. Says he has information you need to hear. I have nothing to say to him. Adrian, I get it. But he's claiming he wasn't working alone. That there are others, and he'll give names if you come talk to him. Adrian was quiet, his mind working through the angles. This could be manipulation, a last-ditch attempt to gain sympathy or control. But if Wendell had been part of a larger network, when, tomorrow morning, I'll meet you there. The county hospital's secure wing smelled like antiseptic and fear. Adrian walked past guards and locked doors to a room where Wendell Fritz lay in bed, his face swollen and purple with bruising. One arm was in a cast. An oxygen monitor beeped steadily. Victor stood by the door. He's been sedated, but he's lucid. You want me in the room? Please. They entered together. Wendell's eyes opened, focusing on Adrian with an expression that might have been regret or might have been calculation. With men like Wendell, it was impossible to tell. Thank you for coming, Wendell said, his voice rough. I know you have no reason to hear me out. You're right. I don't. But if you have information that could protect other children, I'm listening. Wendell's eyes filled with tears, real or performative. Adrian couldn't say. I'm not a good man, Adrian. I know that now. The things I've done, the people I've hurt. Get to the point. There's a group. Men like me. We shared resources, information, equipment. I was never the worst of them, but I was part of it. He swallowed painfully. They're still operating, still hurting kids. And I can give you their names. All of them. Adrian felt sick. Why now? Why not before? Because I thought I could protect them. Thought there was honor among us. Wendell laughed bitterly. But there's no honor here. And when those men in prison found out what I'd done, they made sure I understood that. So now I'm making a choice. Not for redemption. I know I'm beyond that. But maybe I can stop some of what's happening. Or maybe you're trying to reduce your sentence by cooperating. Maybe that too. Does it matter? If I can give you names that save even one kid, isn't that worth it? Adrian looked at Victor, who nodded slightly. Whatever Wendell's motives, if he had legitimate information about a network of predators, they had to pursue it. I'll need everything, Adrian said. Names, locations, how you communicated, what kind of content was shared. And Wendell? If you're lying, if this is some kind of game, I will make sure you never see daylight again. I'm not lying. Over the next hour, Wendell detailed a network that made Adrian's skin crawl. 12 men, ranging from a school administrator to a youth pastor to a pediatrician, all connected through encrypted forums where they traded surveillance tactics and footage. Wendell had been a peripheral member. He'd shared tips, but never, he claimed, actual footage of identifiable victims. I deleted everything after Rosie found it, he said. I was ashamed. But the others, they're still collecting. Still recording. Victor took detailed notes. Adrian listened, his professional detachment firmly in place. Even as part of him wanted to put his hands around Wendell's throat and squeeze. When they finished, Adrian stood to leave. Wendell called out, Adrian, wait. He turned. What? Tell Stephanie. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I love her, even if she can't believe that anymore. I'm not your messenger, Wendell. If you want to say something to your daughter, write a letter. She can decide if she wants to read it. Adrian paused at the door. And for what it's worth, I don't think you're capable of love. I think you're capable of possession, control, obsession. But love requires seeing someone as a whole person, not a thing to be monitored and owned. You never learned that lesson. He left without looking back. The information Wendell provided led to the largest child exploitation ring bust in the county's history. All 12 men were arrested within a week. The investigation uncovered thousands of images and videos, dozens of victims, and a network that had been operating for over a decade. Adrian's name was kept out of the press, but he received personal thanks from the FBI agent who'd led the operation, a woman named Cassie Sharp who'd spent 15 years fighting these battles. Your father-in-law might be a monster, she said over the phone, but the information he gave us potentially saved a lot of kids. I know that doesn't erase what he did to your family. No, Adrian agreed. It doesn't. That evening, he told Stephanie about the meeting, about what Wendell had revealed. She listened without speaking, her face pale. So he was part of something bigger, she said finally. He was. Does that make what he did better or worse? I don't know. Worse maybe. Because it means he had support, validation from others who thought like he did. Or better, because without that network, maybe he wouldn't have gone as far as he did. Stephanie shook her head. I don't want to think about it anymore. I just want to focus on Maya, on us, on moving forward. Then that's what we do. But moving forward proved more complicated than simply willing it so. Maya started having nightmares, though she couldn't explain what they were about. Stephanie's therapist suggested that children sometimes absorb their parents' trauma, even when shielded from the details. They increased family time, established new rituals untainted by Wendell's presence. Friday movie nights. Saturday morning pancakes. Sunday bike rides through the neighborhood, Maya riding ahead while Adrian and Stephanie followed, no longer afraid of who might be watching. Slowly, incrementally, they healed. Rosie sold her house and moved across the country to live near her sister. Before she left, she came to say goodbye, pulling Adrian aside while Stephanie and Maya packed cookies for her journey. I failed her, Rosie said quietly. I failed Stephanie by not protecting her when it mattered. You did what you thought was right at the time. That's a generous interpretation. She smiled sadly. Thank you for protecting them both. For being the father and husband that Wendell never was. I just did what any parent would do. No, most parents would have confronted him directly, made a scene, maybe thrown a punch. You played chess while he was playing checkers. You were patient and strategic, and you won. She squeezed his hand. Take care of them, Adrian. I will. He watched her drive away. This woman who'd lived in fear for 15 years, finally free. Wendell's appeal was denied. His sentence was extended by 5 years based on the revelations about the network. He would be an old man when he was released, if he survived prison at all. Adrian didn't care what happened to him. Wendell Fritz was a problem solved, a threat neutralized. He'd served his purpose by exposing the larger network, and now he was irrelevant. What mattered was the aftermath, the rebuilding. 1 year after finding the tracker, Adrian stood in the garage on a Saturday morning, watching Maya oil her bike chain. She was 14 now, taller, more confident. The bike had been replaced. She'd wanted something new, untainted by association, but the purple one still hung on the wall, a reminder of what had been overcome. Dad, Maya said, not looking up from her work. Yeah, kiddo. Mom told me a little more about why Grandpa Wendell isn't around anymore. About how he put a tracker on my old bike. Adrian tensed. What did she tell you? That he was scared something bad would happen to me, so he did something bad to try to prevent it. That sometimes people hurt the ones they love because they're broken inside. Maya looked up at him. Is that true? Adrian knelt beside her, meeting her eyes. It's one way of looking at it. But here's what I think. Your grandfather made choices. Bad choices. And those choices hurt people. The why doesn't matter as much as the what. He violated your privacy and our trust. That's not love, Maya. That's not protection. That's something else. What is it? Control. Some people need to control others to feel safe. And when you grow up with that, you might think it's normal. You might even do it to others without realizing it. He put his hand on her shoulder. That's why I need you to understand something important. You deserve privacy. You deserve trust. And if anyone ever makes you feel like you don't, you come to me. Okay. She paused. Do you think I'm like him? Grandpa Wendell. No, Adrian said firmly. You're like your mom, strong, kind, resilient. And you're like me too, I hope. We both believe in respecting boundaries, in trusting people we love. That's the opposite of what your grandfather was. Maya nodded slowly, processing. Then she went back to her bike chain, the conversation apparently complete in her mind, if not his. That night, lying in bed, Stephanie turned to him. Maya asked me about Dad today. I know. She asked me to. I tried to be honest without being graphic. Was that right? I think so. She's old enough to know some of the truth. And better she hear it from us than piece it together on her own later. Do you think we did the right thing? Going after him so hard. Adrian considered the question seriously. I think we did the necessary thing. Whether it was right, I guess that depends on your definition. Was it legal? Mostly. Was it ethical? I believe so. Was it justified? Absolutely. No doubts. None. He put a tracker on our daughter's bike, Steph. Who knows what he would have done next if we hadn't stopped him? She was quiet for a moment. Thank you. For what? For seeing what I couldn't. For protecting us. For being patient with me when I defended him. She kissed him softly. For being exactly who you are. Adrian pulled her closer, feeling the weight of the past year settling into something manageable. They'd survived. They'd won. And most importantly, they'd protected what mattered most. The freight truck that had carried Wendell's tracker to Mexico was long gone, its cargo delivered, its route completed. But sometimes Adrian thought about it. That tracker making its journey south while Wendell watched in growing horror, unable to stop it, unable to explain it, unable to do anything but confront the reality that his surveillance had been turned against him. It was a small victory in the grand scheme of things. a psychological blow rather than a physical one. But it had been the opening move in a larger game, one that Adrian had played with patience and precision. And in the end, when all the pieces were counted, when all the consequences had fallen, Adrian Potter could look at his daughter and his wife and know with absolute certainty that he'd done what fathers were supposed to do. He'd protected his family, not with rage or violence, though he'd felt both, not with confrontation or ultimatums, though those would have been satisfying, but with intelligence, strategy, and an unwavering commitment to seeing justice done. The purple bike still hung on the garage wall, a trophy of sorts, a reminder that monsters could wear familiar faces, that predators could hide behind love, and that sometimes the greatest act of protection was recognizing danger before it fully manifested. Adrian Potter had recognized it. He'd documented it. He'd prepared for it. And when the moment came, he'd executed his plan with the cold precision of someone who understood that winning wasn't about being the loudest or the strongest. It was about being the smartest, the most patient, the most committed. Wendell Fritz had thought he controlled the narrative, controlled his family, controlled the outcome. But he'd never controlled Adrian Potter. And that had made all the difference. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.